Everyone thought BigXthaPlug's rise would last forever. The Dallas star with the booming voice, the street charisma, the momentum that felt unstoppable. He looked like someone who had finally cracked the code. From the trenches to the charts, from local buzz to national headlines, he was on a path that felt bigger than music. But none of that mattered on the day he stepped into that courtroom. The energy in the hallway was heavy, the kind of silence you can't ignore, the kind that presses on your chest even when nobody is talking. People who'd been with him since day one sat in the benches, eyes glued to the judge's face, praying that the system would give him another chance. But deep down, everybody already knew what was coming. Every rumor that had been floating around for weeks suddenly felt real. Every whisper that they're trying to make an example out of him hit differently as the judge took a breath. And Big X, known for his confidence and bold posture, looked like someone holding everything inside while preparing himself for the worst. His lawyer kept flipping through papers as if some miracle might appear on the last page. But that miracle never came. What came instead was the sentence. The one that echoed through the room like a punch to the stomach. A sentence that instantly pushed his entire career, his dreams, his momentum, and the people depending on him right into uncertainty. Fans online had been arguing for months about whether he deserved leniency, but reality doesn't care about comments and hashtags. Reality only cares about the choices made, the history on record, and the power the system holds. And the system did not spare him. The moment those words left the judge's mouth, everything changed. It wasn't just a legal decision, it was a goodbye. Maybe not goodbye to life, but goodbye to everything he built, everything he was working toward, everything he believed he was about to become. Some people cried, some people just sat there frozen, some pulled out their phones and started typing because the world only knows how to react through screens now. But Big X didn't cry. He didn't break down. He simply nodded, like he had already accepted the possibility long before stepping into the courtroom. Maybe he knew this moment was inevitable. Maybe he had been carrying the weight of it the whole time while still giving fans music, energy, and performance. Some people say artists can feel when the streets are starting to close in around them, when the countdown to something irreversible begins. And when Big X turned to look at his family sitting a few feet away, it felt like he was silently saying everything he couldn't speak out loud. A goodbye, a promise, a regret, a warning, all in one look. This story isn't about fame. It's about how fast everything can disappear, how quickly one decision or one charge can erase years of work. And as they led him away, nobody knew when or if the world would see BigXthaPlug free again. The hallway outside the courtroom felt colder than usual, like the air itself knew something heavy was about to happen. BigXthaPlug stood there with his hands clasped together, breathing slow, steady, controlled. Anybody who knew him personally could see he wasn't scared. He was bracing. There's a difference. Fear is when you don't know what's coming. Bracing is when you do, and Big X had been bracing for months. Ever since the case resurfaced, ever since the DA started pushing harder, ever since he realized the system wasn't interested in who he had become, only who he used to be. As he stepped inside, he didn't look back at the cameras. He didn't acknowledge the people whispering his name from the back row. He made his way to the defense table, sat down, and kept his eyes forward like a man refusing to break in front of the world. The judge entered and the room fell silent. Big X sat tall, but you could see the tension in his jaw. His lawyer leaned over, murmuring a few last-minute reassurances, but they didn't land. Not because Big X wasn't listening, but because he already knew hope wasn't on the judge's face. He had seen that expression before in other courtrooms, on other lawyers' shoulders, in other friends' stories. That look where the person judging you has already made up their mind before you even speak. And today, Big X was the one being measured, not by his growth, not by his music, not by the lives he'd helped change, but by a file full of decisions made long before he had a platform. People online had spent weeks debating whether he deserved a harsh punishment. Some said he had too much talent to be locked away. Others said fame shouldn't protect anybody from accountability. But none of those voices mattered here. Courtrooms don't hear social media noise. They hear charges, history, and technicalities. And the DA used every one of them. They painted Big X as someone who had all the chances in the world but kept slipping back into trouble. They talked about the old environment he came from as if it was a lifestyle he still embraced. They ignored the tour dates, the interviews, the sold-out shows, the fact that he had finally begun building something solid. They only focused on the part of his story that made him look dangerous, and the judge listened. When it was the defense's turn, his lawyer spoke with urgency. He emphasized Big X's transformation, the way he'd invested in his community, the opportunities he gave other young artists, the stability he'd worked so hard to build. He talked about how fame didn't just change his income, it changed his circumstances. He argued Big X was on a path that deserved protection, not destruction, but the judge didn't flinch. Not even once. Big X watched him without blinking, reading the signs, preparing himself for the impact. The courtroom wasn't just filled with strangers. His mom was there, sitting in the front row, hands shaking slightly in her lap. She had lived through every step of his life. The struggle, the hunger, the nights he came home exhausted from trying to find a way out. She'd been proud of him when the music took off, proud when his name started trending for the right reasons, proud when he told her he finally felt like he had a purpose. And now she was watching everything threatened to collapse right back into the cycle she prayed he would escape. Across the aisle, fans had gathered quietly. Some wore his merch, some had their phones tucked in their pockets, resisting the urge to record. They didn't want to be part of the noise. They wanted to support him, but support doesn't sway a judge. Then Big X was given the chance to speak. He rose slowly, straightened his posture, and looked directly at the judge. His voice didn't shake. He didn't beg. He didn't shift blame. He acknowledged his mistakes, explained his growth, and talked about how hard he had worked to distance himself from the world that had once consumed him. He talked about the people who depended on him. Not fans, but family. He talked about wanting to be someone his younger self could admire. And for a moment, the room softened. Even people who didn't know him personally could feel the sincerity in his words. But when he sat back down, the judge lifted the file again and the softness disappeared. The judge began reading through the charges, the violations, the history. Yes. Every sentence landed like a reminder that the past doesn't let go easily, especially not for black men who rise too quickly, too loudly, for the comfort of the system watching them. Big X's mom quietly wiped a tear. His manager bowed his head. Big X didn't move, didn't break, didn't react. His stillness felt like defiance, like a man refusing to give the system the satisfaction of seeing him fall apart. When the judge finally read the sentence, it felt like the entire room inhaled all at once. The words hit the walls, bounced off the emotions, and sank into the people watching. Some gasped, some whispered, some simply froze. But Big X just nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already accepted. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, whispering about appeals, options, next steps. But Big X wasn't thinking about legal strategy. He was thinking about the people he loved, the people he might not see for a long time, the life he had built that might not survive this blow. As officers approached, he turned his head just enough to meet his mom's eyes. That look held more than any sentence ever could. It held apology, gratitude, love, regret, and resilience all pressed into one silent message. Then he stood, let the cuffs click around his wrists, and walked out of that courtroom without looking back. Outside, crowds waited to see his face, to record his walk, to post their opinions. But the man they saw wasn't defeated. He was hardened, focused, ready to endure whatever waited on the other side of those doors. The news of BigXthaPlug's sentencing spread faster than wildfire. Before he even reached the holding area behind the courtroom, blogs were already posting headlines, Twitter was flooded with reactions, and fan pages were scrambling to confirm the details. Some people were outraged, saying the system was trying to bury another young black artist who finally made it out. Others acted like they had predicted this from the beginning, calling it the inevitable result of the streets catching up with him. But none of those voices reflected the real story. The story of a man who had been fighting two battles his entire life, the one in front of him and the one behind him. Inside the transport van heading toward the county facility, Big X stared at the metal floor, letting the reality settle in piece by piece. His wrists hurt from the cuffs, but that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was the feeling of being pulled backward into a world he thought he had escaped for good. The sound of the engine, the clanking metal walls, the muffled conversations of deputies up front. It was all too familiar, too close to memories he had buried under music, touring, interviews, success, and the promise of a better life. Now those memories surfaced again, reminding him how quickly everything could disappear. When the van stopped and the door swung open, the bright floodlights hit him like a punch. Deputies instructed him to step step out, and he did, moving with the same controlled calm he had in the courtroom. He wasn't going to give anybody a show. Processing took hours. They took his belongings, logged his information, took his fingerprints, and walked him through the same maze of hallways countless men had walked before him. Big X didn't look lost. He looked disappointed, not in the system, because he already knew how the system operated. He was disappointed in himself for allowing even a piece of his old life to pull him into this moment. Meanwhile, his family was gathering outside the jail. His mom leaned against the front of the car, staring straight ahead, crying silently. She didn't scream or collapse the way outsiders assume mothers do. She just stood there, wiping her tears with her sleeve, trying to accept the harsh truth she couldn't avoid. His manager was on the phone non-stop, trying to figure out legal strategies and media statements. His team argued about whether to release a message to fans or keep quiet until they had more clarity. Everyone was stressed. Everyone was scared, but nobody more than Big X's little brother, who kept pacing around the parking lot asking the same question over and over. How long he gone be in there? Back inside, Big X was led to the unit where he would be housed. The guard walked ahead of him, listing rules and procedures, but Big X barely processed the words. He was focused on the sound of metal doors sliding open and slamming shut behind him. Each door felt like another layer of his freedom peeling away. As he walked through the final gate, a few inmates recognized him instantly. "Aye, that's Big. No way he really in here. Bro, I got your songs on my tablet right now." Some looked at him with admiration, others with curiosity, a few with envy. Fame inside a jail can be a blessing or a curse. It gives you protection, but it also paints a target on your back. Big X understood this immediately. You don't survive the streets without understanding how quickly power shifts. He kept his head down and made his way to the bunk he had been assigned. The room was small, cold, and poorly lit, with a thin mattress and a blanket that barely smelled clean. He sat down slowly, exhaling long and deep. For the first time since the sentencing, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. As night settled, the jail grew quieter. Voices faded into the distance, metal clanks dulled, footsteps slowed. Big X lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, replaying his entire life in his head. Not the fame, not the concerts, not the awards, but the struggle that shaped him. The nights he stayed awake in a hot apartment wondering if he'd ever make it out. The people he lost along the way, the choices he made out of survival. He had always believed he could outrun the consequences of that survival, but now he realized they had simply been following him silently until the moment he slowed down. His mind wandered to the music he had yet to release. He had been working on an album he believed would redefine his sound. His producers had been excited. His label had been preparing a major rollout. Everything had been set in motion, and now everything was paused indefinitely. But even in the midst of all this chaos, Big X didn't feel hopeless. He felt determined. Sitting in that cell, he realized something important. The world hadn't heard his last message. His story wasn't ending here. It was changing shape. While he lay there, another inmate approached the bars softly. "Yo, Plug," the man whispered. "Keep your head up. You ain't the only one in here with talent left on the outside." Big X nodded without looking over. He knew the man meant well, but Big X wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for clarity, a plan, a mindset, a way to turn this into something more than a downfall. Early the next morning, breakfast trays clattered through the hallway. Big X sat up, rubbed his face, and prepared himself for the routine. He wasn't about to lose himself in the monotony of jail life. If he had to be here, he would use the time. He would sharpen his writing, reflect on his past, and figure out how to rebuild once he got out. But no matter how much resolve he had, the reality was still painful. He was missing everything happening outside. His mom's cooking, studio sessions, late night drives, blasting unreleased tracks, the freedom to step outside, breathe different air, and see real sunlight. On the outside, fans were demanding answers. His name trended non-stop. Some argued he had been targeted because of fame. Others said the streets had caught up to him. Industry insiders whispered about how his label would respond. Would they pause his contract? Would they drop him? Would they support him during sentencing? Nobody knew, and rumors only made things worse. But in the middle of all that noise, something unexpected happened. Artists began speaking out. Rappers he had worked with, people he had inspired, friends from Dallas, producers who had watched him grind from nothing. They all started posting messages of support. Free Big X began trending. Street murals were painted overnight. His streaming numbers skyrocketed because fans wanted to remind him he wasn't forgotten. Inside his cell that afternoon, an officer walked by and said, "Your people making noise outside." Big X looked up, a small hint of pride crossing his face. Not cockiness, pride. Pride that despite everything, he had built something real, something people cared about, something the system couldn't erase. But just when that small spark of hope began to settle, he heard a new sound echo down the hallway. The sound of deputies approaching his cell, calling his last name with urgency. He stood up, heart steady but alert, waiting to hear the words that would shape everything that came next. The deputies stopped outside BigXthaPlug's cell, their footsteps sharp against the concrete floor. One of them called his name again, this time louder, and the entire unit fell silent. In jail, when an officer calls someone out unexpectedly, it can mean anything. A meeting with a lawyer, a disciplinary issue, bad news from the outside, or something far worse. Big X stood still, his expression unreadable, waiting for clarity. The deputy motioned for him to step forward, and as he approached the bars, the officer unlocked the door and gestured down the hallway. "Let's go," he said. "You got a call." A call. That meant it was serious. Jails didn't allow random calls. Either someone important was trying to reach him, or something had happened. Big X followed silently, passing rows of cells where inmates watched with curiosity. Some called out his name, others offered words of encouragement, but he didn't react. His mind was focused entirely on what he was about to hear. When he reached the small concrete phone room, the guard nodded toward the receiver. "Oh, you'll get a few minutes," he muttered before stepping back. Big X picked up the phone, pressed it to his ear, and waited. A second later, his manager's voice came through, breathless and shaky. "Bro, listen, everything just flipped on the outside." Big X didn't respond immediately. He simply tightened his grip on the phone. The manager continued, "Your sentencing blew up bigger than anyone expected. Every major outlet picked it up, and the label, they're freaking out. They're trying to figure out what to do with the project. They don't want to drop you, but they're scared. They're waiting to see how long you're gone." Big X exhaled slowly. He didn't need sympathy. He needed information. "What they saying?" he asked quietly. His manager hesitated. "They're scared because the DA made it sound like you ain't coming home for a long time. But your lawyer thinks there's a way to appeal. He wants to see you tomorrow. He said don't lose hope." Hope. That word felt foreign in a place like this. Hope was fragile, and Big X had learned not to build his plans around fragile things. But hearing that the door wasn't fully shut, that changed something. His manager continued talking, telling him about fan support, about industry noise, about how his streaming numbers were going crazy. But Big X's mind drifted to something else entirely. The idea that maybe this sentencing wasn't the end of his career, just the beginning of a different chapter. When the call ended and Big X handed the phone back, the guard escorted him to another room, a cold, fluorescent lit visitation space. He wasn't expecting anyone, but when he stepped inside, he froze. Behind the plexiglass window sat his mother. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands rested on the metal counter like she was holding herself in place. Big X sat down slowly and picked up the phone. For the first time since the sentencing, his mask cracked. Not broken, not shattered, just cracked. "Ma," he said softly. She didn't speak for a moment. She just stared at him, searching his face like she was making sure he hadn't lost himself already. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "You're stronger than this. You hear me?" Big X nodded, forcing himself to stay composed. She continued, "This ain't the end for you. You didn't come this far for the devil to win now. I know you made mistakes, but I also know the heart you got. And God don't waste souls with that kind of calling." Her words sank deep. He swallowed hard, trying not to show how much he needed to hear that. All his life, his mother had been the anchor that kept him from drifting too far. Her voice had pulled him out of darkness more times than he could count. And now, sitting behind glass, he felt the weight of her faith in him, a weight that made him want to rise, not fold. As the visit ended, she placed her palm against the glass. Big X did the same. It wasn't enough. It wasn't the warmth of a hug, but in that moment, it felt stronger than anything. When he returned to his unit, something inside him had shifted. The despair was still there, but so was a newfound stubbornness. If the system wanted to bury him, he was going to make sure he rose louder than ever. Word of his unexpected movement around the jail spread fast. Inmates approached him more often, some just wanting to talk, others offering advice. One older inmate, a man with years etched into his face, approached Big X during recreation time. "I seen dudes come in here with talent," he said, "but they let this place break them. Don't be one of them. You got something folks out there care about. Use this time. Write, plan, build your mind if you can't build anything else." Big X nodded, respecting the man's perspective. He had already been thinking the same thing. That night, he sat on his bunk with a dull pencil and a half-used notebook someone had given him. He started writing, not songs, not at first. He wrote thoughts, reflections, fears, promises, memories, goals, everything that had built the man he was. Everything that had pushed him toward the person he wanted to become. Hours passed without him noticing. The notebook filled page by page, and the weight he carried began to shift from rage to purpose. He didn't know how long he would be here. He didn't know whether the appeal would work, but he did know one thing. He refused to let this sentence define the rest of his life. A week later, his lawyer visited him in a small interview room. Papers were spread across the table, documents, transcripts, files. The lawyer leaned forward and said, "Look, your case has holes, real holes. The judge ignored things he wasn't supposed to ignore. There's a path to overturning this. It won't be easy, but it's possible." For the first time since the sentencing, Big X allowed himself to hope without resisting it. He asked questions, serious ones, about timelines, strategy, odds. The lawyer answered each one with honesty. By the time the meeting ended, Big X felt a fire burning again. Not the fire of anger or frustration, the fire of belief. Back in his cell, he lay awake staring at the ceiling again, but this time the thoughts were different. He imagined walking out of jail after the appeal. He imagined going back into the studio, dropping the hardest project of his life, letting the world hear the pain, the truth, the transformation. He imagined standing on stage, hearing fans scream his name again. He imagined redemption. The world might have said goodbye to him after the sentencing, but he refused to return that goodbye. Not yet, not ever. As lights out settled over the jail and the unit grew quiet, BigXthaPlug closed his eyes. Not to escape, but to prepare, because no matter how long this road would be, he had already decided something the moment the judge sentenced him. They could take his freedom for now, but they would never take his story. If you followed BigXthaPlug's journey up to this moment, then you already know this story isn't just about a sentence. It's about a system that waits for young black men to rise, only to yank them back the moment they slip. But what happens next is something none of us can ignore, because right now, Big X's future hangs in a balance that depends not only on legal strategy, not only on appeals, not only on the courts, but on the people who believe in him. Yes, the headlines will move on. Yes, the blogs will chase the next scandal. Yes, the industry will get quiet when the heat rises, but his supporters? They are the one force that can't be silenced. And the truth is, artists don't stay alive in this game because labels back them. They stay alive because the people who ride for them refuse to let their names fade. This is the moment that separates the real supporters from the spectators. It's easy to cheer when someone is winning. It's easy to tweet when someone is dropping new music. But the real test comes when the world turns its back. When an artist is trapped behind bars, surrounded by concrete, steel, and silence. Big X needs voices on the outside louder than the voices trying to bury him. He needs streams, yes, but he also needs people speaking up, demanding fairness, highlighting the inconsistencies in the system, refusing to let his story be rewritten as another cautionary tale. If you care about him, ooh. If his music has ever pushed you through a moment in life, if you've ever felt the energy in his voice lift you up, then now is the time to show it. Support doesn't always look like money or noise. Sometimes it looks like refusing to let his legacy die while he's still alive. It looks like telling his story the right way, not the way the system wants it told. It looks like reminding people that redemption is real, that growth is real, that a man's worst moment shouldn't erase the years he spent climbing out of the trenches. Big X never pretended to be perfect. He never lied about where he came from, and he never hid the scars that shaped him. That honesty is what made people connect to him, and it's the same honesty that makes this moment matter more than ever. If you're watching this story unfold, don't let your role be passive. Share his music, keep his name alive, tell people what really happened, pray for his appeal, stand with his family, stand with his fans, stand with the people who believe in second chances and real transformation. Because one day, whether it's months from now or years from today, Big X is going to walk out of that facility and step into a world that either waited for him or forgot him. Which side you're on is your choice. But if his comeback is going to be legendary, it will be because people like you refuse to say goodbye.